is a range of cultural barriers that require the missionaries' consideration. This paper mentions some of those barriers that stand in the way of sharing the gospel in Muslim lands. Furthermore, in the rest of this paper, I'll map out the Muslim mission spaces and places to aid the missionary to focus his energy in the right places. Being aware of these challenges and spaces of ministry helps the missionary to present the spoken and the unspoken message appropriately. Most Islamic cultures, particularly those of Muslim lands, are flow cultures. Okay, we can broadly divide world cultures into two: platform cultures and flow cultures. Platform cultures are cultures where they sleep on a platform, they sit on a platform, and even when they worship, they sit on chairs, they don't sit on the floor. Even eating, they eat on a platform. Okay? The floor cultures sleep on the floor, eat on the floor, worship on the floor. And that causes a major difference in terms of how then even people approach God and how they do worship. And so Muslims are mainly, actually they are floor cultures, and all the activities take place on the floor, including business and many others. And the Muslim worldview, another point is that the Muslim worldview responds to sin from a shame, honor, and fear power perspective, and Dr. Lume has actually taken us deep into the shame, honor aspect, and this afternoon I'll pick at the fear power aspect as well. Unlike the guilt innocence cultures, response of most Western cultures. Now, shame is covered by honor, while the fearful seek for power to overcome. Another point, Islam has a strong sense of community. The Muslim community solidarity is reinforced by the daily communal 5 prayer times where they stand actually shoulder to shoulder. While some societies are individualistic and religion is kept in the private domain, but in Islam, the sacred and the mundane are all intertwined as one. The sacred and the secular is one. Now, a knowledge of the Muslim social space is essential in the understanding. And I, being a space theorist, I get interested in these factors. Now, firstly, allow me to suggest a spatial theoretical framework as a tool to read Muslim spaces and places. And I will majorly draw from 3 major scholars in the area of space theory. That is Henry Lefebvre, in his 1991 book, The Production of Space. And then Homi Bhabha, in the 1994, in his Third Space Theory, 1994. And then Kim Knott, this lady I think teaches at the University of Leeds or somewhere there in North England, in her 2005 book, The Location of Religion. I'll build on these 3. And then secondly, I shall apply this tool, the theoretical framework of reading social space, to identify spaces and places in which the Muslim society functions. And then thirdly, I will explore a range of approaches on how to do church within these spaces. Henry Lefebvre, who actually lived in 1901 up to in the early 90s, was a Marxist philosopher whose theory of space is woven into Marxist ideology. His writing covers a range of issues of his time: capitalist, Marxist intellectual wars, urban planning, architecture, and art, among others. Lefebvre's book, Production of Space, revolutionized the way space was thought as inactive and fixed. Now, to read Lefebvre, as another scholar here has noted, is an enormous task. But I will attempt to summarize aspects that are relevant to this talk here. Lefebvre's 1991 theory of conceptual triad identifies three categories of processes that produce space, or what he calls moments of space. These three are the spatial practice, or the perceived space. The second one is representation of space, or conceived space, as he calls it. And then spaces of representations, or lived space. Now let me unpack, because reading Lefebvre is like when you are a theologian trying to read Thomas Aquinas. Or if you are a Muslim theologian, you teach philosophy and theology of Islam like I do, reading Al-Ghazali. So Lefebvre is a hard reading, but let me unpack him. Spaces of, what he says, perceived space is actually the physical, concrete and material space. And then what he calls representation of space, or conceived space, is abstract, is mental space. And then what he calls as spaces of representation, or lived space, are spaces appropriated by habitation. That's where we dwell. It is the space of experience, such as loving, finding, and creating. So, and even to break it further down, he's talking about the space of land, okay, it's land as you see it, space of ideas, and then space of habitation. So Lefebvre, in his production of space, actually brought in something which did not exist before, that space is dynamic. And then he has gone further to explain how space is produced. It is a big step. And then Kim Knott, in his major book, Location of Religion, published in 2005, says that the way in which Lefebvre conceptualized, theorized, ordered, and restructured the concept of space brought value in how to distinguish its production and appropriation. It's very important. Now she points out that Lefebvre's categorization helped her to understand real places where she could investigate the location of religion. Now, as a missiologist, I mean, this is what we are doing. How do we understand these spaces, locate and even plant and even influence religion in what Kim Knott calls everyday spaces? Of course, then Kim Knott has written other works again, 2005, 2007, 2009, and she continues to do that. She demonstrates how she applies her spatial analysis methodology to locate religion in common places. Because Kim Knott is arguing that religion is not only confined in traditional religion places like churches and mosques and so forth, in the demarcated holy places, but religion is also found in the secular, in everyday places. And that's how she argues. And she uses a spatial analysis methodology to actually do that. And the spatial analysis methodology is a methodology used by geographers and cartographers. But she has borrowed that and brought it into the study of space and particularly to locate religion in everyday places. Besides utilizing Lefebvre, Kimnot as well draws from Martin Heidegger, who says space gathers bodies and things together. So space draws bodies and things together. She has also made reference to Martin Tweed, who sees space of religion as confluences in bringing together. Now, Note then utilizes the three terms gathers, envelops, and confluences to state that space is a configuration of forces or elements. She emphasizes that, in fact, this is one of the properties of space. It is a propensity to gather and to configure. The forces of globalization have compressed time and space in such a way that things are brought together. Hence, space is enacted and encountered in a dynamic way. In other words, I could be here, but also be in another place. I could be talking here, but through these gadgets, somebody could be also watching and listening somewhere, so that I'm here and I'm in another place. I could be here with you, but at the same time, I could still talk to someone in another continent. This is what globalization has done. And so then, Kimnot, as I said, draws from the field of spatial analysis. That's another field. It is utilized by geographers, topologists, cartographers, geometrics in mapping locations. And they have sixfold objectives. And I'll not bring that to you, the six of them, because of time. But later on, of course, they'll be there in the full paper as it is published. But let me just take two from the spatial analysis. One, to understand where one is located on a map and in relation to other bodies. So they say it's important to understand where you're located and in relation to other bodies. As a witness, as a missionary, it is important to know who you are, where you are located in relation to other bodies, and particularly those you are trying to witness to. You need to understand that location. The third point, I'm not reading to, the third point is determining how places are related to each other in proximity, coincidence, intersection, overlap, and accessibility. That's very important. So, the process, let me move a little bit ahead, okay? So Kimnot, as I've said, says, religion is common in everyday spaces. And how do we locate it? And how do we do religious business in secular places? The other scholar that I want to draw from is Homi Bhabha, the third space theory. The concept of third space theory has been utilized in an attempt to understand what happens when popular cultural texts are incorporated into the school curriculum. The concept of third space was first developed in depth by Bhabha as a metaphor for the space in which cultures met. It is a space in which colonial authority is challenged and hybrid identities are created. Now, by the third space theory, if you continue with it, then you come into colonial and post-colonial studies. Now, that's not what we are doing here, but that is the basis of it. This space is not a cohesive one. Bhabha stresses that it is a site of tension, of competing powers, and of insurmountable differences. And so, another scholar actually explains the third space further. And third space is the space where the community gathers. So the first space is the home, the second is the workplace, and the third is the social space where people gather. In his book, The Great Good Place, Oldenburg demonstrates why these gathering places are essential to community and public life. He argues that bars, coffee shops, general stores, and other third places, in contrast to the first and second places of home and work, are central to local democracy and community vitality. So, again, the third space theory. The first space is the home. The second space is where you go to work or school. Where we are now, this is a second space. After this, if you go to Rongai or go out there or go into a sauna or whatever this place that you gather, that is the third place where the community gathers. And that place is a place of immense importance as people interact in those places. Therefore, applying the foregoing theoretical framework, I wish to identify 3 social places in which missionaries connect with people. As we have said, firstly, the home of the witness, the home of the missionary, the home of the Christian, is the springboard of his ministry. The home discourse, whatever people talk about, the home discourse shapes the social life of a society. It is in the home, in the house, that individuals can be vulnerable to each other. So the way that we discuss in our homes and houses, that shapes the way we think outside. And what happens on the streets and out in the other 2 spaces is a result of what we are at home. Now, secondly, is the space of cultural exchange outside their house. It is where activities such as school, work, and businesses take place. The outside area provides people with life activities that define a people's status in the society. It is the place, cultural exchange, where worldviews meet. In that space, worldviews meet, clash or sync, and negotiate with each other to find a balance. It is the space of culture shock, conflict, and learning. We have already stated, is the community space, which are the church, the cafes, and the clubs. People's lives do not only oscillate between the home and the sphere of cultural exchange, but they need another place that sorts out worldviews and preferences, and that is the space of the community. It is the community arena that the home and cultural exchange discourses interrogate each other to form healthy societies. So that whatever goes on in the home and at the workplace, where worldviews are clashing or sometimes getting together, but in the third space, it's more relaxed and people can negotiate and agree and even form clubs of commonalities. That's why football club or whatever clubs are formed to do what, or societies are formed in the third space. So therefore, looking at the missionary or the witness or the Adventist or the Christian serving in a Muslim context need to set their homes in such a way that makes it easier for Muslim inquirers to visit. Now, Dr. Lungwe has mentioned other aspects of Islam, like using the left hand and so forth. But your home as a witness who lives in a Muslim society, who interacts with Muslims, need to be set in a way that Muslims can be able to interact with you. Not long ago on the Arabian Peninsula, maybe last year, I interacted with a missionary there. I said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "I'm so frustrated." I said, "Why?" He said, "No Muslim has ever visited my home, but I do visit with them. But when I invite them to visit with me, they don't." So I asked the missionary, "So when you visit them, what do you see?" And he described to me what he sees. And I said, "Okay, Have you seen women there in the house? I've never seen them, but I can hear voices in maybe they're in close proximity in other rooms, but I've never gotten to see them. If that's how the Muslims are structured in the home. So you visit and you're served by male members of the society, and you interact with the home, and you interact with them. And then I asked him, so if they came to your place, how would it be like? Would you like be sitting with your wife and serving them with your wife? I said, yes. I said, that's why they will not come to your home, because they have figured out, and they don't want to shame you, they cannot tell you, but they have figured out how probably you live, and so they won't visit with you. Because the Muslim space is gendered, and that causes a big difference. Your space, Christian space, is not gendered. Look, there you are seated. Ladies there, you know, it's not gendered. But the Muslim space is gendered. Probably men would be in the front, not probably, men would be occupying these front rows, and the ladies would be at the back because the space is gendered. And in their own homes, there is space for prayer. Maybe in your house, if they come and it's time for prayer, they don't have a place to pray. And don't be surprised if a Muslim visited your house and they say, Pastor, let me use your bathroom. Can I use your bathroom? Yes. And they go to the bathroom, they open, and then they come out and they tell you, I cannot use this bathroom, but I feel so tired, I have to leave and go find a place to relieve myself. And you wonder, why can't they use this bathroom? It is because the bathroom is constructed in a way that when this man stands to answer his lesser call of nature, he's actually facing the Kaaba. And you cannot do that. You cannot point at the Kaaba with whatever. So you cannot do that. So when we as missionaries are living with Muslim people, and we want to interact and fellowship with them, it's not only food. Oh, I don't eat pork and drink alcohol, so everything is okay. No, there are many other factors. Think about space. Think about how the Muslim space is ordered vis-a-vis how the Adventist or Christian space is ordered, and whether that actually meets the criteria. So the missionary's home. The missionary's home is a place to socialize, to explore the Word of God. It could be a place of baptism as well as for the nurture and discipleship. Therefore, the setting of the missionary's house must take in consideration aspects of the Muslim culture that is not in conflict with the Word of God. So consider those. The second space of work, of school, of business. The space of cultural exchange is public and it connects several homes. It is the business platform on which culture shock occurs because people spend many hours in this area. There are lessons for the missionary and his family to learn in this location, such as how to dress. So, as you go in the public arena, how do you dress? And how do you greet? You know, Islam, and when you go into Sharia law, it tells you who greets who first, and how does the greeting go. All these are there, and we need to be aware of them. How to interact, how to shop, you know, to go to school, work, and even how to eat. You had here an example. Satan eats with his left hand, does his things with the left hand. So you can imagine if you try to, you know, the way that, that's serious culture conflict. The Westerner with his fork in the left hand and the knife in the right, and is eating with the left. Oh, this is the embodiment of Satan himself. How come he's eating like Satan? Let me tell you, recently I was in Dubai and I was speaking to leaders and I unpacked, you know, there's a way that we use the Jesus method casually.
Yeah.
He mingled.
Yes,
Do you know what that means? Come on, if you look at it in the context of mingling with Muslims, you are mingling, eating with the right hand like this with your fork. Are you really mingling? No, you are not mingling in the right way. Are you greeting in the right way? Are you walking in the right way? So he mingled. For us in the Muslim arena, this means a lot. And we take time to unpack it in a more deeper way. In most Islamic contexts, the center of influence needs to be a missionary. And his sway should be felt in the area of cultural exchange. So, I mean, we talk of centers of influence, is a concept we're using today. But applying this to Islam, in Islam, the first center of influence is the mosque. Any building, any center that challenges the influence of the mosque will be dealt with. If it distracts people, it's time for prayer, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And then this center of influence, people are still not hearing the call to prayer, the imams will work on this center of influence because nothing challenges the mosque. Number two, the center of influence is a person of influence. So you can either, if you cannot do a building, invest in a person, invest in a missionary, make them a center of influence. The Christian individualistic and compartmentalized mindset leads us to assume that there's a separation of the religious space and place in Islam. In Islam, religion weaves through the entire fabric of society. Therefore, the missionary needs to carry his or her belief everywhere she goes, in the street, in the place of work, in eateries, at sports, and at school. These connections are set on a trajectory that leads back to the home in which inquiries could hear the gospel. So as they interact outside like that, then they can invite them to their homes. The community space. The community space, the third space now. We see that the home spaces converge in the area of cultural exchange where conflict and dialogue take place. In the community space, cultures interrogate each other, and those with similar interests and values merge to form sports club. Others prefer to socialize in coffee places and pubs, while another category builds spiritual communities that result in churches and mosques. A question arises regarding how the church should look in these three Muslim spaces. Can we do church in them? What kind of architecture, furniture, and liturgy? What is the identity of the new believer? Of course, much thinking goes into answering these questions. The resultant church must be a bridge building agent that breaks down cultural barriers. The gospel needs to be presented to Muslims in respect of the Shem Hona paradigm, as has been said already. And so at this point I want to suggest that it is useful for the missionary on the Muslim field to identify all possible barriers to the witness of the everlasting gospel and to study the three spaces that I mapped out already in this paper. An understanding of how these three corresponding discourses relate to each other will contribute to the development of appropriate tools to enable the missionary to be more effective. Ignoring these vital components continues to see the missionary equipped with witnessing tools that ignore the reality on the Muslim ground. And in my last 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, then how does then the church look? How does your believers, the community of believers, look in a Muslim society? I have identified Muslim mission spaces and how the missionary should present themselves. A missionary life that reflects the character of Christ is mostly is most likely to bring new disciples to Christ. New converts require the missionary to think of how and where to place new believers. It is a process that leads to the question how the community of believers and the church should look like in the Muslim context. The missionary would think of music, when thinking of that, think of music, dress, liturgical order, best time, duration of the worship, and the location of the place of worship. The identity of the new believer is worth considering as well. Of course, it is impossible to do justice to this presentation just in the time allocated, but I wish to present two broad concepts that might offer a conceptual framework to guide our thinking in this matter. Firstly, the categorization of worship places and the view of worship times. And secondly, the different ways of how Christians perceive God in relation to set times of prayer, places, and spaces of worship. Engaging with these two concepts would, in my opinion, inform the missionary the best way and place and space to anchor the new believer. The way in which the new believer is located will most likely set the convert on a path to a new identity formation. I've talked of theology of religion and so forth, but let me just say that there are three ways in which world religions and faiths and traditions conceptualize worship places and spaces. The Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they actually worship in houses. They have houses of worship. Some Eastern religions do, but animists and others don't have places of worship. Congregational worship, the Abrahamic faiths, yes, they congregate. Eastern religions and animists, no, they don't. And set times of prayer, the Abrahamic faiths have times of prayer when they meet to pray. Other world religions, they don't really have a congregational or set times of prayer. So in that way, then with the Abrahamic faiths, we share the aspect of building. But how should the church look like? Again, in these spaces, church can be done at home. If church is done at home, I've already mentioned how the home is set up in a way that Muslims people from a Muslim culture can actually find place and space whereby they can listen to the word of God. And as the missionary goes out, how do they look like? And how can, if church is done in the second space? And of course it can be done. It can be done because church is where 2 or 3 are gathered and Jesus is there. That is church. People can be standing and studying the word of God. People can be seated. People can sit down and do that. We have, and you can imagine, and if I raised here any of these Muslim background believers here and asked them, how did it feel for you in the first day that you attended church and you sat in the pews? They will tell you it felt very strange. Because in Islam, you sit on the floor. You are a servant. You are a slave of Allah. You are an abd. You sit down on the floor. You don't sit on, only Allah sits on the throne. But everybody else sits down. So then we are in church sitting on chairs. No. It doesn't look well with Muslims. And then church can then be done, of course, in the third space as well. And if we do church there, how should it look like? How should even our building look like? How should we set the church in a way that Muslims can find the opportunity to worship there? These works, as I've said as I conclude, we have to carefully study and understand Muslim spaces and places. And theorists have given us ways of tools of how to be able to understand these spaces, and then that will inform which approach that is appropriate in which space, in which place, and how we should even present ourselves.